Today, you're going to be learning everything there is to know about DeSci from a 101 perspective and how to use it to your advantage. I'm building this presentation in such a way so that anybody, regardless of their understanding experience within either crypto, science, or DeSci, can come away understanding how to use DeSci to their advantage. By the end of this conversation, you should understand a few things. The first is how bioprotocol can help you fund your scientific research. Next, strategies of building attention and awareness for your science. This is extremely important as awareness and attention are the key in order to get your research funded and accelerated. Then you'll hear about other successful projects that have used DeSci in order to accelerate their work. And finally, you'll hear and learn about how DeSci is faster and easier than government grants. We also think, and we've seen from the founders in our ecosystem, that DeSci is actually a superior model to venture capital as well. And we hope that those of you who are interested from a startup perspective consider DeSci as a potential avenue for your work as well. Before we get into all of that, I'm going to give you a little bit about myself so you know why you should listen to me. My name is James. I'm the chief scientist here at bioprotocol. I've got a background in chemistry, and I funded my own research through government grants during my time at academia. So I know what it's like to have to go through the arduous process of writing grants, applying, hope that you get funding, finding out months later. And I've also done the other side of the playbook where I've even spun out my research into startups that got funded by venture capitalists. And I went through the Silicon Valley Accelerator Program, Y Combinator, and even spent some time as a venture capitalist. So I've seen all of the possible ways that science can get financing through government grants, through the traditional Silicon Valley startup pipeline, and now at Bio, we're building a new way, a third way, called DeSci in order to fund scientific research. We're doing this because we think that there's more problems that people need to solve than we have talented people solving them. When we queried scientists, we learned that they spend way too much of their time actually raising funds and not enough time doing science. And we found a way to use blockchain to help. So DeSci is at the intersection of blockchain and science. These two industries intersect in various ways. There are different types of DeSci related projects, anywhere from incentivized peer review through open access publishing. There are some projects working on data provenance and ownership, but for the sake of this conversation, we're going to focus on the last one here, which is funding scientific research. This is what we specialize here at Bio. Now, in order to understand how this works, I'm going to give you just a very high level breakdown of how blockchains function. We're going to work our way from blockchains all the way through actually funding that science. So for those who don't know, blockchains are basically their public ledgers. And these public ledgers are open and visible by anybody. They're a permissionless network where you can use any device to go in and inspect this public ledger, where everyone that's inspecting it or hosts this ledger has a copy of it themselves. What we've realized and we've discovered is that you can actually represent intellectual property or a scientific idea, a scientific hypothesis on this ledger. In the same way that you could encrypt a transaction, or sorry, you could post a transaction, rather, you can also post a piece of material, a scientific hypothesis or a piece of intellectual property. And using smart contracts, which is basically the software paradigm that these systems run on, we can stamp your idea or your intellectual property into this public ledger. The process of doing so, in the end, creates what we call an intellectual property NFT or an IP NFT. This is a one-of-one of your scientific idea or your hypothesis. And you can kind of think about this as the digital equivalent or the crypto equivalent of the analog USPTO provisional application for a patent. This is all done through a public ledger where you maintain ownership of your intellectual property and you post it publicly the same way you would post your provisional patent over to the USPTO. So as a summary, an idea or piece of IP stamped on the blockchain mints us an IP NFT. Now, when these ideas are put together, in some cases, actually a provisional patent is also filed underneath the hood. We can explain all the logistics and the legalities of that later on. But at a high level, what you need to walk away with here is knowing is that we're minting these intellectual property NFTs on a blockchain. Now, once we have these IP NFTs created, we developed a technology in order to turn these via tokenization into what we call IP tokens. IP tokens, as you can see here, are basically fractionalized small little bits that represents the initial intellectual property idea, concept, or hypothesis that you have as an initial scientist. And we can fractionalize these down to as small basis as you want. Typically, we would turn these into 100 million or a billion tokens. And then finally, what we do at Bio is actually launch these intellectual property tokens to the market that the market purchases in order to help you raise for your scientific research. Okay, when we put all of it together, the process is actually rather simple. Scientists have a novel idea or a hypothesis. Using the blockchain as infrastructure, we go ahead and we mint this intellectual property NFT. Bio transforms this into intellectual property tokens, right? These are the fractionalized intellectual property NFTs. We launch these IPTs on the Bio platform, on our launchpad, and then participants buy them in order to fund your idea. It's a simple concept, but it's extremely powerful. You get to perform your scientific research based on the capital that you've received by selling a fraction of your idea, and buyers get to participate in the upside in case your research goes on to make massive novel impacts. People here that participate are hoping that you can create the next Pfizer or Moderna mRNA vaccine, that you can develop a cure to cancer, or frankly, that they just really want to support the piece of research that you're working on and they think that it is deserving of a shot on goal. Our dream or our vision here at Bio is that we can take any research project, any kind of a concept, and actually fund that through our infrastructure, through our platform to develop and through the research experience novel intellectual property and novel data that essentially backs the value of that IP. So you can imagine that through the experimental process, we've de-risked or we've validated these initial hypotheses, and in turn, that increases the value of that intellectual IP. From there, there's many different pathways to monetizing the IP, anywhere from creating consumer products or commercial products. This research can be spun out into an individual company that could go on and raise its own financing. It can be licensed to someone through a joint development agreement or through an IP sale, or the asset can even be acquired by another entity that would like to take it and commercialize it from there. We envision a system where these proceeds then get to flow back to the initial project's treasury, where the team can decide what they want to do from there, the team being you all as the scientists. Perhaps you have a next wave of innovation that you'd like to take on and a next piece of research you'd like to fund. Then you have the resources to go ahead and do that. So the question is, how do we get here? How do we get